we don't evolve. So then we get into this midlife crisis of what was working, but I don't feel like I have another path. I can't quantify it. So therefore I'm at this crossroads. I just continue to have a relationship with the devil. And then I try to counter that by launching in new geographies, launching new products. This stuff matters. People are purchasing my stuff not because of the features necessarily. That's all awesome. But like the why people buy it, that still has to be as strong or stronger. Because at the end of the day, we have no patents. Everyone can copy and people have. So that's what our margin could come from. That was the story for us.
What happens when the Facebook ads money machine runs dry?
Most of us make this decision that, hey, I'm going to just pump it into Facebook. Very profitable at the beginning. As you spend more, as you work through the existing latent demand, it gets less and less efficient, and we don't evolve.
For most brands, it's panic. But for Chubbies co-founder Preston, it was the start of a great idea.
We started a brand called Chubbies Shorts, and the idea is, we just wanted to create a fun brand and turn it into something that people would care about.
He helped transform a single product into a cult status D2C brand that scaled, exited for 9 figures, and ultimately IPO'd for over $1 billion.
It is now part of a publicly traded company and doing better than ever. Like a 26% EBITDA margin, growing.
So join us in today's episode as we explore how Chubbies rose above the noise with bold positioning and viral social content.
It's just find ways to predict growth based upon actions that we can drive that are indicative of us prepping the 95% who are out of market.
Why performance marketing eventually hits a wall and nearly broke Preston's business.
Our just fundamental economic model was very much strained. We were opening stores, starting wholesale. We were doing like all that stuff at the same time. Our inventory position was like in a rough place. We were transitioning where we were manufacturing our product. Long story short, really rough time.
The painful but necessary shift from click-based ROAS obsession to brand-led resilience.
If these people just generally aren't clickers and buyers, that then requires different strategy and tactics. It also requires a different definition of success and measurement.
And how to actually measure brand marketing in dollars and not vanity metrics.
So we have to find a way to measure it. There are a variety of ways to do it, right? Branded organic searches, clicks from branded organic search. Some of the things we were doing was like investing into follower growth or shares or whatever it might be, and then future incremental revenue growth. It was really rough while we were operating, but that informed what we're now doing it.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying the videos, why not consider subscribing? We drop bi-weekly content that will help you improve your business right here on the channel. Preston, welcome to the podcast. It is an absolute pleasure having you on today.
Thank you for having me.
Perfect. Can we kick off then with your backstories at Chubbies, how you started the brand, how it evolved, how you built it, and then the eventual exit and IPO?
Absolutely. So we were 4 friends from college who just were fed up working for other people and wanted to find a company to start. Didn't know what it was. And it, basically from process of elimination, we weren't going to start a software company because none of us knew how to code. We weren't going to do this thing. But we did have this feeling that just from like a consumer product perspective, for some reason, all of us wanted to work in something that you could touch and feel, and as kind of like a response to everything being so digital, right? And technology based, where it's like, what's the value that's being created? Just kind of wanted to be able to make something where you could hand it to someone, they buy it, they give you money and they smile and they have a great experience. And you're like, cool, that's an amazing thing. So, basically, if you just kind of think back, there were a few brands from a men's fashion perspective, or just men's fashion in general, and even still today broadly, but maybe less so, was very stuffy and I'm cooler than you and you can't hang with us, you got to look a certain way. And that was the brand or the vibe perspective. And then from a product perspective, there was the general vibe was long shorts, cargo shorts, right? Hiding your legs kind of thing. And it seemingly was a huge departure from what we thought was just a very cool time, which was, the 70s and 80s, pictures of our dads that we had seen, when they were on a trip, whether on their spring break or, in Hawaii on the honeymoon or whatever it might be, where we were just kind of like, man, that there's this departure from like that look, which is awesome. Their mustaches, their sideburns, their whatever, to now, it's just a totally different vibe. So there are all of these dynamics where we just thought, well, and then you coupled it to like who we were. Two of us played soccer at Stanford. I played rugby.
Wow.
The fourth of us grew up in the southeastern part of the United States. All of these places generally were more shorter shorts, were more of the norm, right? And so there was this I'm my own customer kind of thing where I just can't get something I want. And so there are all these dynamics. The other thing, Shopify was just becoming a thing. Like we're old. So we started this thing in 2011.
Okay. And did you guys have any background in product or brand before this?
One of us did. Yeah, Rayner. He went through GAP's management training program, which is an awesome program, and then was kind of poached out of GAP to go to Dockers Levi's, and kind of like try to bring back a resurgence to Dockers. And so yeah, I mean, on the surface, maybe we seem like I don't know, a bunch of idiots, but there are people. At least Rayner. I mean, he really knew and knows his stuff from the product side of things, like to a very very deep level of expertise. So yeah, Rayner was and is the person who created and creates awesome product.
Interesting. And any digital marketing experience?
No. I mean, I think we're just nerds and we like learning and like testing. Like we're obsessed with consumer psychology. We're obsessed with things like neuroscience, obsessed with things like I don't know, data and testing, and knew the importance of brand, right? I mean, read Kellogg on branding and emotional branding and things like that early on because we knew we were selling a commodity and that at the end of the day, what we really wanted to bring to the world was just a different feeling and represent something that didn't exist, both from a product perspective, because product is brand, but from a identity, from a brand, whatever you want to call it, perspective. So we read a couple books, like stayed at a Holiday Inn last night kind of thing. But no, we just everything was self-taught. So it was all just let's try this, see what happens. Let's think of things from first principles perspective. Let's just try to learn. And I think that was a huge benefit because we didn't have a lot of tried this, wouldn't work. This is how we used to do it kind of stuff. So we were just starting fresh.
Okay. Could you just explain that? So, why is it beneficial to be figuring things out on the fly?
Just because everything's changing so fast
Okay.
and experience can be a limiter in that what is true changes every day, meaning the context in which we operate costs to do X thing. How competitive is the auction if we're talking paid media for this particular objective, like just to get super niche, or what is the actual goal of what we're trying to do, right? I mean, maybe it's more traditional media based or like reach and frequency, blah, 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 but maybe it's not that. Or how do we just constantly have to use the term beginner's mind kind of thing. It's just harder to do when you have a lot of formal training, formal experience, and you can't just approach every day from a perspective of like genuine curiosity and just looking to learn and fail fast so you can maximize speed of learning.
Okay. Can you just talk to how the brand evolved over time and the thought process behind the exit and where Chubbies eventually ended up?
Sure. I mean, over time, it was a process of trying to learn how to grow and grow correctly, balance short and long term, deal with the things, the brand life cycle is relatively consistent as I've studied a bunch of brands at this point where you get started, you rise above the noise early on, largely doing a lot of just interesting different things. You have a very kind of like strong differentiating positioning that taps into something that isn't being met by another brand. You do that effectively, you rise above the noise, you generate some cash, then you have this decision to make. Most of us make this decision that, hey, I'm going to just pump it into Facebook, and that works at the beginning, right? You scale. It's very profitable at the beginning. As you spend more, as you work through the existing latent demand, it gets less and less efficient, and we don't evolve. So then we get into this like midlife crisis of um, what was working is no longer working, but I don't feel like I have another path because nothing else, I can't quantify it, right? I need to be able to precisely measure the ROI of every dollar I spend. And so therefore I'm at this crossroads where it's, do I change how I measure and define success, or do I just continue to have a relationship with the devil because it's the devil I know rather than the devil I don't, and I just knowingly take worse and worse performance, and then I try to counter that by launching in new geographies, launching new products, expanding, knowing that the core of the brand is weakening. Not that expanding product, not that expanding distribution is bad at all. It
Yep.
is also brand building, but there's a bit of like running from the truth that can happen psychologically that we certainly dealt with. And then there's this like reset where brand reset, business reset, whatever it is, but where we then get to a place where, okay, what got us here won't get us there.
Hmm.
We need to change how we think about success, define success. We're not going to measure everything on a click-based ROAS in terms of how it drives short-term revenue. And we're looking for balanced growth. I want resilience more than I want to maximize whatever today's revenue can be. I want my worst days to get better. You start to realize the benefit of that because they're two different ways of behaving. And because then it's just sort of like, I want to limit blow up risk because I want my equity to be worth something. And shooting for my equity to be worth $1 billion, but having 3x the risk of having it be zero becomes, at least for a consumer brand, not applicable to every company, becomes much more important than, or becomes far less important than maybe saying my equity is worth some smaller number, but my probability of achieving it is far higher, and my blow up risk of having it be a total zero can go down. So it's just a shift in perspective as you grow. And so that's the resilience piece. And then around the exit, I mean, we tried to sell the business or go through some kind of a transaction multiple times, as I think many businesses do. We also almost went out of business multiple times. So learned a lot. And all credit to the team. I mean, I think the huge disclaimer is all credit to the team. My role in this teeny tiny. And so I'm just in awe of the team, the other founders, and particularly as it relates to the exit. I mean, the funny thing is these things happen when you least want them to happen. Like
Yep.
when you want to most be the owner of your business, and if you had $10, are you going to invest it in Facebook, in crypto, or your own business? The second you answer that with your own business, that's when everyone wants to buy it, right? And that's kind of what started to happen. I mean, we went through this transition, but then once we came out of it and learned what balanced growth looks like, learned the value of getting most of our revenue from people searching our brand, coming directly to our site, those sorts of behaviors, rather than from, fighting to jam my ad in someone's newsfeed to get the click and the purchase. The resilience, the profitability, the EBITDA margin, the top line growth all went way up. And click ROAS, however, went down, which is the funny thing.
Interesting.
But yeah, it became a situation where we were very blessed where our team, the other founders and the rest of the team ran an awesome process. There was a competitive process, and ended up finding a great home. And yeah, so very much a blessing, very much a gift. And then now the business is part of a public company, just reported being over 100 million annual in US turnover,
Wow.
15% or more, maybe solid double digit EBITDA margins, growing at solid double digits every year, or annually. So I think it's maybe now 6 or 7 years of profitable growth. So it's amazing to see. I'm totally humbled. Again, I was only a tiny part of it, but it's awesome.
Congrats. It certainly sounds like the baby's found a good new home.
Yeah, yeah. And the baby's grown up a little bit. Baby's now what, 14 years old.
And just before we get into the kind of branding side, in terms of growth for you and for channels, was it D2C originally and then Amazon, wholesale, and stores? Was that the evolution?
Close. DTC, yes. And then I think before Amazon, we started opening a few stores. One in San Francisco, which is where we started, and then a few others. And I would call them more pop-ups, to be honest. They weren't legit stores, like we spent nothing to get them going. They were month to month leases. Like we used like, like shipping pallets as like the decorations and the tables. We had a team member who could just build things himself, and so kind of like built everything out in the store. But yeah, it was owned stores, and then it was probably wholesale, like just brick and mortar, at a small scale. And then maybe a little bit with Amazon, dabbling, just to like, what do we do with Amazon? Are they going to copy our product? They're going through that whole discussion, and whether it be just to like move liable inventory, or is this actually a channel that we're gonna think about? But yeah, that was the rough sequencing.
Okay. And do you recommend that sequence for other brands, or is that just working specifically for you guys?
I don't know about the actual sequence that I think makes the most sense. I wouldn't say necessarily all brands can support owned stores. Like, you need a lot of product. So I would therefore think about, well, Amazon or wholesale. And then like in terms of how to pick, I don't know. I mean, if you could do both, that's amazing. Like on Amazon, if it's just sort of like a situation where you're just capturing your organic demand on the platform and the margin is consistent, then that's amazing. Because that's, as we think about building a business and building a brand, there's like building the mental availability and then there's building the physical availability. And you just always want to be in balance. So if you keep building this brand, this mental availability, but you're not in more places, you'll hit a ceiling of growth. So, and it'll take time to scale the wholesale piece. So it's like, I want to do it right. I want to make sure I sell through. And so I want to slow build. Like I I don't recommend the I'm in 3,000 Walmarts, as your first go. So it's like crawl, walk, run for sure, build the brand, but then build the physical availability there. Just be available everywhere. I think for many brands and for our experience, it's good. And then today, right? I mean, 85% of 85% of retail sales in the United States is still done in brick and mortar. Similar breakdown for men's apparel. So it's like, if you want to become the biggest possible business, you got to show up in brick and mortar. And yeah, you can open a bunch of own stores. That's certainly an approach. But then there's also, for many or most brands, even finding great wholesale partners that you can grow with is truly, I think, the way you can reach scale.
Okay. And at what stage of that journey or evolution did you start to realize the importance of brand and kind of focus more on that?
It's a funny question because at the beginning, we knew it, like, hey, let's start a brand. And it started with a product, right? It was generally like a shorter short inspired by a hand-me-down that Kyle, one of the co-founders, had inherited from his uncle. And so it was this awesome old, perfectly worn pair of shorts, shorter, of course. It just had an awesome, like, faded color. And it was just like, I can't get this anywhere, but it's awesome. And so it started around this product. But then the general idea is like, we knew we were just selling a pair of shorts. You know what I mean? So like at the end of the day, anyone can make a pair of shorts. And sure, it was shorter and we went with bright colors and blah, blah, blah. But we kind of knew that at the end of the day, there was no patent. There was no like network effect, moat type thing, right? It was like brand. That was the thing that was going to be our differentiator. So and I think I see this a lot. It's like, you pay lip service to that idea and you do it at the beginning, right? That's like, I think if you're bootstrapped generally, or if you haven't raised a ton of money, that's like the only way to like rise above the noise, is like you have a brand, you do things that just get people's attention, get them to pay attention and remember you in some form, which is all this brand stuff is. But then what happened for us is we started thinking about how to scale, right? How do we find these like scalable, consistent, forecastable ways to build a business? And so then, at least for us, it was like an over rotation into like Facebook ads and like paid media. And okay, what's my ROAS? And let's just very closely focus on this general idea. And we ended up forgetting the kind of like the core of this whole thing, which is just like, do things that reach a lot of people, get them to pay attention, get them to understand what you do, why you do it, so that when they come in market for whatever your category is, they just automatically seek you out, go and buy from you, search for your brand name and buy from you. We kind of lost touch of that. And it was like, no, I got to get the click. It's got to be the cheapest click possible. And they have to convert in 24 hours. So it was a start, and then it was a forgetting, and then it was a re-remembering once we were kind of forced to come back to it after we kind of reached this midlife crisis where that I think a lot of brands get to, where it's like, diminishing returns, my CAC is going up, or profitability going down, or I'm having to discount more, or any of these manifestations of just you haven't created enough net new demand, basically. I think we've captured all of the existing demand. That's when we realized, okay, we got to get back into balance. We were out of balance. We were capturing demand. We weren't generating demand. How do we do both? So then it kind of required a different approach, but that was kind of like our journey.
Okay. Am I correct in saying then, so you kind of got sucked into the Facebook ads direct response kind of game, and then you cap out, I think the stat is like 3% of the market that's ready to buy, and then results and returns start to fall off, and then you kind of went back to brand?
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty spot on. Yeah, like we sucked in, or just it's a powerful shot in the arm. You just kind of feel like the most powerful person in the world when you spend $1 and you get like 5 or 4 or 3 or 2, and it just kind of, I don't know, gets smaller. And then like you just start doing things that don't actually drive change in behavior. They just claim credit, and so you can pad your stats, if you will, to make sure you get bonused. But from a comp perspective, but yeah, you're totally right, Rick. Any of these brands, I think many of these brands, when you start, you started it for a reason. There was unmet demand, right? So you just enter the market with existing demand that you then capture, and everything you do generates non-zero net new demand, right? But just not enough to keep up with how much you're capturing, and I think that's a problem. But yeah, you're totally right. Whether it be 3% who are in market, 5%, 10%, I don't know what it is, but just the vast majority, of the things that we were doing, we're assuming that everyone was in market. You know what I mean? We weren't doing anything to prep people who were out of market. And the reason, like the so what, or like how do I know that I'm prepping people who aren't in market or aren't actively shopping, is like I can't convert you. Like my product offer urgency, my hook, my whatever, my thumb stopping problem solution, whatever, like that's in one ear out the other if you're not actively shopping. You know what I mean? So like, how am I prepping you? How am I building this emotional connection to where it's like I'm not a shorts buyer, I'm a Chubbies buyer kind of thing. And that's a slight nuance. But then, when they're prepped, then they're much more likely to click on your ad. Or you don't even have to play that get a click game, and they're just like searching for your brand, or they've memorized your URL, or they're searching the brand on Amazon, or they're just like going into Dick's Sporting Goods and like, where's the Chubbies? And that's when you really start to build these flywheels. But yeah, you're spot on in terms of the sequencing.
Okay. In practical kind of marketing terms, how do you do that?
How do you do like the transition or the brand building thing or yeah. So they're like fundamental, I try to dumb it down to fundamental rules, if you will. So like 95-5 rule, right? If you believe that there's some non-zero truth to that the vast majority of people that you're hitting in your audience are not actively shopping, then you then have to agree that, okay, it probably requires a different set of tactics, a different approach, a different mindset. And then if these people just generally aren't clickers and buyers, which is generally how our whole tactic, strategy, measurement methodology is determined, that then requires different strategy and tactics. It also requires a different definition of success and measurement. So it requires those things to evolve and change, right? But we can't waste money unless, you raise $1 billion, which no consumer brand really does, right? So we have to find a way to measure it. There are a variety of ways to do it, right? Branded organic searches, clicks from branded organic search. Some of the things we were doing was like investing into follower growth or shares or whatever it might be. And then because we found the statistically significant connection between those engagements that we were driving and future incremental revenue growth. It was really rough while we were operating, but that informed what we're now doing at Chubbies. Just find ways to predict growth based upon actions that we can drive that aren't that are indicative of us prepping the 95% who are out of market, and that has just shown that, okay, this does the thing, right? It's not just the fact that like you're getting the share or whatever, but that's a part of it. But it's like I'm entering net new auction. So there are a million ways to build brand awareness, which you can define as like the total number of people who, know about you, have an emotional connection to you in some form where they're even considering a purchase decision, and then who actually, end up thinking of you automatically when they come in market. That's kind of like how I would define it. To accomplish that, right, you got to reach more people. So first of all, it's like you can spend more money or you can try different tactics. You can obviously try to do all this organically. So like if you're just come up with these awesome ideas that allow you to just organically go viral all the time, do that. Do that until you can't. Some people can do that, not all. So then sometimes you got to just pay for it. And for us, we were performance marketers on Facebook, TikTok, Google, YouTube. So that's kind of the world that we knew. And so we just used different tactics. Like we used different campaign types, different optimizations that allowed us to get into different auctions, that allowed us to get in front of people for less cost, and allowed us to, because we started looking not just at that click and that purchase, which we were pretty good at, all the best practices, blah, 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 ensuring as much incrementality as possible in the demand capture side of things, but just on the demand gen end of things, it allowed us to get back to, I think, what we can forget as a brand as time goes on is like content that is not as much about like this feature on this product and this offer and this hook, but more about like why the brand, you know what I mean? Like the overarching stuff. And I think that's where we try to get back to. And not that everything is like this brand ad, like here's who we are and this is blah, 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 but just like stuff that builds the feeling around the brand where it's more about like, this is Chubbies first. This is like why Chubbies, rather than, hey, buy this pair of shorts right now. Have to do both. But we had gotten away from doing this kind of stuff. But when we started just running different types of engagement campaigns or follower growth campaigns or whatever, but just optimizing for different things, the stuff that was, driving the cheapest results, if you will, or the most brand efficiency, were like our organic piece of content that we loved, that made us laugh, but that didn't necessarily always go viral, right? It's because that wasn't necessarily for us the determiner of, because we could like play the hacky meme game all the time, but that wasn't necessarily accomplishing what needed to happen, which was, yes, it needs to get distribution engagement, but it also has to, in some form, mean something different because it came to you, or increase the probability that when someone sees that and they go from out of market to in market, they think of my brand, they come to my website and buy. They think of the brand, they Google my brand name, or they think of the brand and they're like, yep, sweet, I know this brand, I'm clicking, I'm buying. And that's it. So like, it's like some paid tactics for us, right? A million ways to do it, but the paid tactics on the platforms we already knew and were spending money on and already had workflows to support. And we were just using our organic creative that we found got a lot of shares per people reached, and also told you about who we are and what we do to some degree. Not that you're always hitting people over the head with it. Pretty simple. And then you have to have the math in place and the statistical tracking in place because you can't do person level on this stuff, right? Because it's much more about broadly the set of behaviors that we're driving rather than I'm going to follow Preston around the internet and just see when he buys. It's just a different way of approaching it. So the data science is extremely important, which not all brands have, blah, 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 blah. But that's how we approached it.
Okay. So this is a pretty kind of radical shift in thinking on the marketing side. Does this lead to, I don't want to say disagreements, but people pulling in different directions at the company in terms of, CFO versus CMO and stuff like that?
It might. We had no choice. So ours was maybe a little bit easier in that, our just fundamental economic model was very much strained by, let's call it, pretty much only doing demand capture, performance marketing, direct response, whatever you want to call it. Because we were opening stores, starting wholesale. We were doing like all that stuff that you talked about at the beginning at the same time in our inventory management. Our inventory position was like in a rough place. We were transitioning where we were manufacturing our product. Long story short, really rough time. So at least on our end, on the marketing end of things, we just had to change the way we were doing things. So it was maybe slightly easier, but yeah, I mean, it was an evolution in terms of how we measure, how we talk about things. For us, one of the first things that we did was, and this is all of the credit to the finance and ops teams, was like, get our marketing team a readout on like yesterday's contribution dollar generation, which is really hard when you got a ton of SKUs with varying costs. So that was huge because then when we started optimizing toward like contribution dollar generation rather than revenue, it just helped our team make much better decisions on the demand capture end of things, and even on the demand gen end of things. But yeah, that was kind of like the key, if you will. But yeah, there were always the questions like, how are we going to measure this? How we know what this is doing? But it becomes an easier conversation when we're aligned on the pain, that there is a problem, that what got us here won't get us there, and that if we keep doing the same thing, after having exhausted everything, right? After having tried to like 10x our creative output, after having done all of the CRO audits, after having done X, Y, Z, Z, blah, 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 then it's just like, well, I would obviously just want to have more people searching for my brand and not having to play this meta game where I feel so dependent on getting that click and that purchase. When I say meta, I don't mean broadly the platform. I mostly just mean like that entering that purchase conversion auction where I'm just trying to get that click and the purchase. And where we just felt dependent on a platform we didn't necessarily feel like we controlled. So yeah, I mean, there certainly was an evolution. Luckily, our CFO was a co-founder, and he had a broad view of like, hey, this stuff matters. People are purchasing my stuff not because of the features necessarily. They are. It's a fucking awesome product. I don't know if I can say that. That's all awesome, and it's amazing, and it is best in class. Like, it does stand out, and it stands on its own. But like the why people buy it, that still has to be as strong or stronger as anything on the product side of things. Because at the end of the day, we have no patents. Everyone can copy, and people have and continue to copy exactly our product. So like, then what? Why can we charge more when they're charging less? Why can we have a margin? Because in any capitalistic system, right, everyone's going to come for your profits. Brand is the moat. Patents are the moat. Low-cost producers, the moat. We were neither one of those last two. It was just brand. So that's what our margin could come from. Anyways, yeah, that was the story for us.
Okay. Just to round things off, you've talked there about how hard and how important it is as well to kind of measure the impact of brand. Can you just tie that in with what you're doing today and how you're kind of stepping in to fill that gap?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it seems like it all started from dealing with this problem firsthand, which is like, everyone goes through a brand life cycle. Everyone gets to this place where like you plateau. You know what I mean? And for many brands, which is our story, it was like we just generally found that we weren't generating enough net new demand. And it's hard because it's hard to measure the success or failure of generating net new demand. So because you're generally doing things that don't drive a click, because you're prepping people who aren't currently in market generally. Now, people are coming in market every single hour, day, minute, etc. But you got to talk to them differently. It generally requires different tactics, and to do it in such a way where you're doing enough of it for it to fuel future growth. Because a lot of us, we've just gotten really good at demand capture. So good, like much better, right, than generating that new demand. So for us, yeah, it was how do we measure that? How do we actually connect, whether it be awareness building, top of funnel, brand, whatever you want to call that term, to actual money, rather than some proxy metric that is like brand awareness went up 2 points. It's like, great, you're always left with the so what, right? Or like that's a bullshit metric. Or you've had experiences where brand awareness went up 2% and like you couldn't discern any change in the financial outcomes of the business. Or it's you got the data so far after you did anything, you don't know how to attribute it to an actual action that you can take. So like, how can I connect today actions to future revenue in a way that is as statistically significant, locked down, predictive as is mathematically possible? That's what we're trying to do with Marathon. And then to validate all this brand building stuff that we can get super skeptical about with long-term geo holdout tests. And then the thing that we've learned, so it's like a software measurement piece of like actions that I can take, and how do I measure it? How do I tie today actions to brand building so that I can fuel my baseline revenue, right? My incoming customer acquisition, where if I like turn things off, I still have this incoming stream of new customers Googling my brand, coming to my site. So the software piece, holdout piece, but it's like what we've learned is not just about measurement software. It's about like helping brands get to this place where they're doing the brand and performance in balance, and they can measure it and they know how to do it. And that's like the outcome, where the outcome ultimately is like increased, variable profit or contribution dollars at a margin you feel good about and have that compounding and grow over time. But that's the thing that's why we do this brand thing, right? It's not just to have fun and get a lot of thumbs up. It's to drive dollars, right? So that's what we're helping folks do. So there's like a service component too, whatever you want to call it, advisory. We do creative production for this special type of content that isn't like super expensive brand. It's not your basic unboxing. It's like interesting stuff that gets people to remember you and doesn't break the bank. And, we're helping on the media side too. Like, how do we actually, you asked, what do I do? We've done it now a lot ourselves for our own brands and for other people now. So actually, like, you can think of us as just like delivering that outcome of like figuring out this brand thing when you feel like, I got to figure this thing out, with software accountability to be a holdout, so the technology piece, but then supported by experts who've done it before on the services side.
Okay. Well, Preston, thank you so much for taking the time to come on. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure the listeners have too. What kind of brands do you work with at Marathon, and where can they go to find out more about you guys if they want to work with you?
Awesome. Yeah. MarathonDataCo.com or Marathon Dataco, as someone told me before. But MarathonDataCo.com is the website. Or just, look me up on LinkedIn, Preston Rutherford. There's shorts in between my first and last name if you just want to get a feel for my ramblings and why I think brand stuff is so important. And the brands, DTC, going multi-channel, kind of feel like, oh man, I'm running into some slowing growth. I'm not getting as much for my dollar as I used to get. And how do I unlock? How can I scale? How can I speed up growth? How can I become less discount or promo dependent? How can I just have a strong brand where it's clear why you're going to buy me versus my competitor? And I don't feel like I have to wake up every day scrounging for every single customer I acquire. Or I want to expand into wholesale faster and have, wholesale buyers, banging down my door trying to get my brand in their aisles, kind of thing. If you want any of that stuff, those are the folks we're working with. Let's say anyone above, 10 million and been around for 3 or more years, because we need like data density to be able to help them. But every consumer brand,
Sounds good. And I must say the LinkedIn ramblings are very good, and this podcast was better. So thank you, Preston.
Thank you, Jordan. It was a pleasure. Thanks for your time.
Scaling an e-com brand is hard. That's why we're on a mission to share as much info as we can to help make it easy. From weekly interviews with the biggest names in the space, to case studies, brand breakdowns, and tips and tricks, and much, much more. Subscribe so you don't miss out.